They said her eyes were too still, that her hair never tangled, even in the wind, that she walked barefoot through thistle without bleeding. Her name was Agnethi of Lofen, and no one could agree on when she'd been born. Her cottage, half sunk and overgrown, had no door, only a curtain of knotted reeds that rustled even when there was no wind. A stone with a hole in the center, a feather plucked from a dying raven. Women came at night and left lighter. Some claimed she cured their fevers. Others whispered she called stillborns back to breath. The midwives hated her. The priest despised her, but they all knew better than to stop her. Children threw pebbles and ran when she looked back. Not because she chased them, she never raised a hand, but because she always looked back. Her stare was too long, too patient, like she knew how they would die. Some said she'd been there before. The black oak in the churchyard sprouted. One of the midwives claimed she'd seen Agnethi stirring a poultice with a bone. Another said she spoke to cats as though they answered. She smiled when the priest read aloud the rites for exorcism. Someone found a book with no words, only drawings. That was enough. Others swore she was just a girl during the great cattle rot of 67. But when she was taken, she looked no older than 30. Skin pale like candle fat, lips stained the purple of crushed elderberries. They found him blue-lipped in his bed, eyes open, mouth wet with blood. No sign of injury, no struggle, only a charm sewn into the lining of his neck. Tooth by tooth, slowly, the scream never came. Only her eyes changed, not wide and dimmed, as if the light in them retreated inward. When they bound her hands, she folded them like in prayer. When they led her barefoot through the village square, the ground did not cut her. When they locked her in the cold cellar beneath the rectory, she sat and smiled. And when the priest came to question her, demanding the names of demons, she simply said, "He dreamed of the river. That is how he left a feather, a thread." The priest recognized her signs immediately, beautiful in a way that unsettled you, as though her face remembered something yours did not. She lived alone at the edge of the fen, where the land grew soft and swallowed boots whole. At first, they came to her for poultices, then for teas, then for charms. A thread knotted 7 times, until the day little Ansel Hargreaves. He was a strong boy, the only son of the cooper and his pious wife, fair-haired, sharp-tongued, and just 6 years old. Agnethi was taken before sunset. She didn't scream, she didn't plead. This they could not accept. The trial was short. It was not meant to be long, but there was a problem. Her smile. She smiled when they called her a witch. She smiled when they spat on her. So they resolved to take the smile away. With pliers, rusted and blackened, they held her jaw open and pulled. And then, in silence, she said the one thing no one could forget. "You have mistaken the river for a well." That night, the rats screamed under the church floorboards, and none of the children slept. The morning after Agnethi's teeth were taken, the village awoke to the sound of crows screaming from the rooftops. Blackbirds in a black sky, they circled above the rectory in a perfect spiral, never landing, only watching. Inside the cellar, Agnethi still sat, blood dried at the corners of her mouth. Her smile now nothing but raw gum in silence. But her eyes, they moved, and what they saw, no one ever asked. A week passed. Then too, the villagers expected her to rot from within, her witch's soul consuming itself without the tools of her craft. But Agnethi did not wither. Her skin remained smooth, her hair thick, and though she was fed only crusts and water, she never begged for more. She did not speak again, not even when Father Henton brought the Book of Saints and read aloud each martyr's death, daring her to break. She came walking barefoot through the marsh, wearing a shift too large and soaked to the knee. Her eyes were milky with silt, and her breath steamed, though the air was warm. No one had seen her before, but she walked as though she'd always belonged. Then the one who claimed she'd seen Agnethi chant under the moon. Each was found drowned, yet without water in their lungs. Their mouths were packed with thistle. Their hands, folded across their chests, clutched the same object, a tooth. When she arrived at the rectory steps, she did not knock. She placed a single reed, doll-head bound, with red thread at the door, and left. From rooftops, that her body might sanctify the ground she had cursed. The villagers gathered. Wood was brought, oil was poured. From windows, from the edge of the fen, she only listened, eyelids lowered, as if trying to remember something older than Latin. And then the girl appeared. She had no name, not truly. The villagers called her Maya. That night, the cooper's wife woke screaming. Her husband was missing. his boots still by the door. They found him 3 days later, knees snapped backward, lips sewn shut with coarse flax thread. On his chest, scorched into the skin, was a single phrase, but her lips would not part. Not even when he burned the doll Maya left behind. Not even when he recited the names of the dead. She warned you. Panic gripped the village. A curfew was declared. No one was to go near the marsh, but the children disobeyed. They said Maya was kind, that she whispered in their dreams, that she knew their secrets and sang them songs from beneath the water. The priest demanded Agnetti speak. Then the midwives began to vanish. First the one who spoke of the bone, then the cap, not their own. And all the while, Maya watched. The priest finally broke. He ordered Agnetti be burned, but when they opened the cellar, it was empty. No blood, no trail, only a shallow bowl of water left behind, and in its center, floating delicately her last tooth. And from the black sky, the crows screamed anew. They searched the rectory for 3 days. They tore up the floorboards, pried open the stone walls, even dredged the nearby stream. No trace, no blood, no footsteps. Agnetti of Lofen had vanished like vapor, and yet the village did not rejoice. Turnips split open, revealing black rot that stank like meat left in the sun. Then came the water. Wells that had run sweet for generations turned sour, the color of rust. Livestock refused to drink, and those that did were found stiff and glass-eyed, tongues blackened, as though the earth itself had cursed its thirst. Fear is not undone by absence, it only festers in silence. The land began to change. At first, it was the crops. Barley heads turned to dust before the harvest. Then louder, clearer, with a certainty that terrified their mothers. They said Agnetti was not dead, that she had gone into the root, that Maya was not her servant, nor her curse but her daughter. From that fissure, water gurgled up, but it was not clean. It carried teeth, hundreds of them, tiny, brown, gritted milk teeth, and molars and jawbone shards, some still red. They took only what they could carry, leaving fires burning and doors ajar. They did not speak of Agnetti. They did not speak of Maya. They did not speak of the dreams, born not from womb, but from grief, a shape made of what had been taken, teeth, hair, blood, they say. She smiled when the roots came through the floor, that she whispered, "Welcome home, girl," before the walls bent inward. But the worst came when the roots began to rise. They burst through floorboards, thick as wrists, twisted and glistening, not wood, something else, something older. They pulsed, as if drawing breath, from the chapel, from the schoolhouse, from beneath the cradle of the cooper's infant daughter, and where they came, the light dimmed. Trees had cracked the stone cottages in half. The chapel was gone, replaced by a weeping willow with bark pale as flesh, and beneath it, the earth was soft, not like mud, but like something breathing. No birds returned after the crows left. A doll, woven from marsh reed, its head bound in red thread. No insects hummed. He pried it open, against warnings, went down with a lantern. "God is testing us," he said, lips cracked, eyes rimmed red from sleeplessness. He nailed the Book of Saints shut and warned the people to stay indoors. But the people did not listen out fully, because something else had begun. Even the marsh grew quiet, as though holding its breath. Father Henton, now gaunt and half-mad, declared a fast. The children were dreaming again. They spoke in whispers at first, as if afraid their own mouths might betray them. "She sings to us," said little Elsworth Tenay, barely 4. "She says the well is open." Father Henton collapsed in the pulpit that Sunday. As he was carried out, froth dripping from his mouth, the stone beneath the altar cracked with a sound like thunder. The villagers fled, not in a panic, but with the eerie calm of those who know the end is already behind them. Lofen emptied in a single night, all except one. Old Mara Peck, half-blind and bound to a chair, was left in her cottage, surrounded by candles. When a search party returned years later, they found the village buried beneath bramble and vine, and in that breathing soil, they say, the roots still whisper. One of the men, a mason from a nearby perry, claimed to have found the cellar door of the old rectory, buried under moss. He was not the same when he returned. Wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat, only dug in his garden, day and night, muttering about a river that ran upward and teeth that bloomed like flowers. They buried him a month later, but before they did, his wife found something beneath his pillow, its mouth sewn shut. Long after Agnethi vanished, the village of Lofen changed, but not in ways anyone had hoped. Crops withered before harvest, the cattle birthed eyeless calves, wells ran foul with the stink of iron. No priest dared return after Father Henton disappeared, his robes found folded at the altar, his tongue nailed to the pulpit. What remained was silence, thick and breathing, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Maya, the girl of silt and steam, was now seen less often. When she did appear, it was only 2 children, and only in dreams. They spoke of her as one might speak of a long-dead sister, beloved and terrifying. The cover was bark, not wood, but true bark, with living moss crawling along the spine. Inside, no words, only pages upon pages of drawings, inkless yet dark as soot. A woman with eyes like floodwater, a priest gnawing on his own fingers, a boy weeping feathers. But when they tried to take it from Josper, he screamed. From its roots came bones, dozens of them, tinny, broken, gnawed. The village midwife, now the only one left, fell to her knees and confessed. Years ago, they had cast stillborn infants into the marsh, naming them to unclean for holy burial. Whole homes sank overnight, as if pulled downward by unseen hands. Those who fled met worse fates found, frozen in circles, mouths packed with teeth that were not their own. It was Agnethi who had wept for them, who had buried them, who had whispered their names. Not with his mouth remained shut, stitched long ago by his own mother, but with every window in the village shattering at once. No one claimed it, no one dared burn it. They said she taught them songs that made birds fall silent, that she drew pictures on their bedroom walls, pictures that bled when touched. The adults forbade such talk, but they, too, began to dream of the river. Then the book returned. It was found on the steps of the old schoolhouse, wrapped in flax and bound with 7 knots of black horsehair. All that remained, above the mist, was the book, floating. But one boy, a mute orphan called Josper, carried the book with him everywhere. He could not read, but he would trace the drawings with shaking hands, whispering to himself in a tongue no one knew. And each time he did, something in the village broke. A chimney collapsed. A baby was stillborn. The black oak bled sap that stank of vinegar. The elders gathered, desperate. They spoke of penance, of burying the book deep beneath the church. That night, he was taken by the marsh. They found only the book, open to a new drawing. One nun remembered seeing before. It showed a tree with roots wrapped around a skull. Beneath it, a name was written not in ink, but in blood that refused to dry. The black oak in the churchyard began to change. Its bark cracked open like bone. Weeping sapped the color of bile. She kept their souls from drifting, the midwife said. We tore the only tether they had. The villagers demanded silence, but the truth had ripened past rotting. That winter, the marsh swallowed half the village, and still Maya came in dreams, her lullabies now cracked with sorrow. We mistook a cradle for a coffin, the children said in sleep, and the river remembers. At the edge of the fen, the schoolhouse crumbled, its stones sinking like bread in water. Open. Here is the final installment of your story. By spring, Low Fen was no longer a village. What remained were husks, walls without roofs, cradles without children, doors that opened onto swamp instead of earth. The church bell tolled only once more by herself before vanishing into the roots of the black oak, which had split into 3 great trunks, each bearing one word etched deep into the bark. She is listening. Their mouths, it was said, had turned to salt. Their eyes grew clouded like Maya's. They walked the edges of the marsh in endless circles, leaving no prints in the mud. Others were last seen walking into the fen, barefoot, smiling, eyes open too wide. Not one returned, and yet their lullabies were heard in the reeds, soft as wind, always in unison. Some believed they had been claimed half-alive, half-drowned vessels now for something older than grief. No one rang the bell again. The sky tore open like wet cloth, and from it came a downpour red and warm, reeking of iron and rot. Where it touched the earth, flowers bloomed black and bone-white, pulsing faintly. The remaining villagers fled, but the rain followed, until they collapsed, weeping, mouths packed with teeth not their own. Of the 67 who once lived in Low Fen, fewer than a dozen stayed. They did not speak. The children, all of them, vanished. Some were taken in their sleep. They plucked feathers from crows and tied them with red thread, only eyes, and they are everywhere. One girl tore out her own baby teeth and left them in a bowl of river water. But those who did find it, always by accident, always alone, spoke of strange things, singing from under the water, dolls hanging from trees, a woman's reflection in the fen's still pools, though they stood alone. She claimed a woman with a mouth of thorns told her to do it. When asked what the woman looked like, she only said, "Then came the night of blood rain. It fell not from storm but stillness. Only his teeth, set in a perfect ring at the center of the churchyard, pulsing slightly in the moonlight. Each was found clutching a single reed doll. Each doll bore the face of a child they had forgotten, and so it was that the marsh reclaimed its dead." Far below the surface of Low Fen, a new root system grew out of trees, but of veins and marrow, whispering lullabies through the soil. Where once was farmland, now only bones. Where once stood a church, now only an altar of jawbone and moss. And beneath it, always beneath, the water stirred, in seed, in every mother who woke screaming with the taste of river mud in her mouth, in every dream that ended with silence. She was no longer a woman, she had become a law. Agnethi had not returned, not in form, but in memory. The book without ink was never found again. But stories lingered. In nearby villages, children began drawing symbols they should not know. They sang in guttural tones, "She doesn't have a face anymore." The priest who heard this walked into the fen the next day. His body was never recovered. Years passed, then decades. Low Fen was struck from maps. Travelers were warned to avoid the marsh. And always, always, the sense that something was listening, something old, something toothless, yet still smiling.